Following the days of September 11th, many of us commented that some of the worst days we saw in American history brought out some of the best in humanity. People were so proud to be Americans. You couldn't go to a store and buy a flag because they were sold out. Strangers lined the West Side Highway, clapping and cheering for cops and firemen. And many throughout the country and the world pledged to never forget. And never forget is something that clearly everyone here takes seriously. And for those of us who have worn the uniform, especially those of us in the NYPD, I remember taking my oath to be a member of the greatest police department in the world. And you take that oath, but in your heart, you also make a promise. And that promise is to never, ever forget our colleagues, the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. And thank God we make that promise to us, because as we've seen throughout our world, the term never forget sometimes is just a hashtag or a bracelet, and people too often do forget. This morning, we are here on this beautiful fall day to remember, to never forget a friend of many here. He's someone who loved the job so much that he encouraged his son to do the same job. And I think that we all know when you join the NYPD, it is by far and away the greatest job in the world. It is truly a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. But far too often, especially recently, the attacks have been on law enforcement and those of us who love law and order. And you're going to hear from other speakers who are going to tell you about Kenny's life, about the work that he did, the commands that he worked in, the love that he had for his family and his friends and his community. But I want to touch on something just a little bit different. Kenny represents everything that is good about the job and the career of law enforcement. He represents going to work every day and doing the right thing, about making the communities that you serve just a little bit safer, about laying your head on your pillow each night knowing that you did the best you can to make the world a little bit better. And in the aftermath of 9/11, he was working. And when everyone said that the air was safe to breathe, we all know that it wasn't. And there's a startling fact that right now, throughout the United States of America, there is someone suffering from 9/11 related illness in every congressional district in the United States of America. It's one of the reasons as to why it's so important that I hope by the end of the year we are able to fully fund the 9/11 healthcare bill, because it is not, as many say, a Northeast New York, New Jersey issue. It is a United States of America issue. And there's no reason as to why our loved ones, our colleagues, in their final days should be walking the halls of Capitol Hill fighting for funding that they all deserve. So Kenny represents so much. He represents an amazing job. He represents a beautiful family, but not just the family of blood, the family of blue. And all of you who are here today to honor and remember him. And when we say never forget, we mean it. And this street dedication here today will tell a story decades to come. We know the people that are here will forever be telling Kenny's story. But this street will forever bear his name. So that decades and decades from now, when maybe many of us are not around, And there's a young kid riding his bike on this corner, and he looks up, and he asks, Kenny Rossello was. Somebody will Google that name and say, kid, he was a hero. He represented the greatest police department in the world. His friends loved him. His family adored him. And he gave his life for the sake of others. That is what serving, that is what the job of being in law enforcement is all about. So to the family, God bless you. Thank you for the honor of being here this morning. And to all of you, thank you not only for supporting Kenny this morning, but thank you for supporting the greater good of everything that is this family of law enforcement. Because right now in this world and in this country, there is no question we are under attack. And to see all of you here this morning supporting someone who wore the uniform and paid that sacrifice means the world to all of us. So God bless Kenny, God bless his family, God bless this community, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
I want to thank the town of Hempstead for taking the time to do this for a very dear friend, Mike Russo, the Nassau PD, and Tommy Russo from the NYPD, the Community Assistance Unit, and of course the neighbors who put up with Kenny washing his car probably every 15 minutes and the floods that it must have created on Ewell Place. Kenny and I started working together in the street crime unit in 1984. And we became friends very quickly. In 1986, we both went to narcotics. He was there before me, and we got an opportunity to work together again. And during a very violent time in the city of New York, it was the middle 80s into the late 80s, and we were in narcotics, so we spent a lot of time together. And when we weren't working together, I think we were washing the cars together on the weekends in the warehouse that he found in Freeport that we could do inside. We were fishing with my dad out in Southold, and we spent a lot of time together. And again, you know, when you talk about partners, I don't know if that exists anymore, but Kenny will always be my partner. We got an opportunity to go to the FBI task force in narcotics, which was kind of a big thing. There was no formal task force at the time, and there was ad hoc task forces working on violent narcotics gangs in the southeast section of Queens. And Kenny and I were selected to do it, and we did it together for probably a little over a year before he got promoted to sergeant. And we separated for a little while because I got promoted to sergeant just after that. When we came back, we actually both came back to narcotics as sergeants. So we were back together again, kind of for the third time between street crime, the first time in narcotics and back. But now that we were sergeants, we were kind of working at two different commands, two different teams, but we'd always keep an eye on each other. And you got to remember, in this day, it was about beepers, home phones, and office phones. There were no cell phones during that time. So to stay in contact took an effort. And so we did that through all kinds of codes. I was telling his daughter that on the radio, sometimes one of us would be chasing somebody else in narcotics, and then all of a sudden you'd hear the other guys, hey, you okay over there? You know, I got a couple guys, and you know, you give them the all clear sign, but we had to talk in code because you weren't supposed to do that on the NYPD radio unofficially. We both got promoted to lieutenant, and again, we separated, but we stayed in contact. Kenny ended up going to the Queens District Attorney's Office after a few commands, and I was out there in Brooklyn North. But there was always this thought that we'd get back together sometime, and I got an opportunity to get promoted to captain, and I took over the criminal intelligence section for the intelligence division in the NYPD. And during that time, I had the Hyder Regional Intelligence Center was under my command, and the lieutenant was retiring, and the chief of intel came to me and said, hey, do you have somebody you're going to put in there? And I only thought of one person. I need a meticulous, neat freak, you know, somebody that could control a federal task force with the demeanor that it takes to interact with different agencies. And Kenny fit that bill. But he was in the Queens DA's office, which is a pretty good job. So I called him and I said, hey, you know, are you interested? I know you're in a good job, but this is pretty good too. And he goes, is it with you? I go, yeah. He goes, I'm taking it. I'll take it. So I didn't have the decision making at the time, he had to go for an interview. He came into my office and the chief interviewed him. We were having coffee. About 10 minutes later, the chief storms into my office. Kenny was still there, and he goes, "Okay, I'm taking him, and I'm going to be here by Friday." So I looked at Kenny. I go, "Obviously, you did well in the interview." And so he came to HIDA. And in those days, intelligence gathering was at its beginning for the NYPD. We had the HIDA Regional Intelligence Center with all the different agencies, and we had the Nassau PD in Suffolk, and plenty in Westchester, and the federal authorities, and all the good things. And it took a lot to manage that place. It was a very high profile political job, and Kenny just did a great job for me there. And I get to talk to him all the time. Of course, as little kids, we used to call and say, "Hey, we're back together again." And of course, in a different rank now. And so it was kind of fun to be in an executive level and work together. Well, I got transferred again, and I now go to the Detective Bureau, and I become the commanding officer of the NYPD Gang Division. And Kenny's still in the Intelligence Division. And a birdie whispered in my ear and said, "Kenny, it's because of the politics of the police department and a high-profile job like HIDA, the new commander was going to make a change, and Kenny was going to get transferred." But of course, he never called me. I'm a full inspector now. I had some authority now. I actually was at a decent level, but he would never call me and tell me that. So I called him one night, during the week, probably about 6 o'clock at night. And I go, "Hey, what's going on?" He's quiet. I said, "What's the matter? Come on, tell me what's up." He goes, "Yeah, they might make a change." He's giving me that low-key voice, the twitching his mustache probably. So I go, "Okay, no problem." He goes, "What are you going to do?" I go, "I'm not going to do anything. I'll tell you what I'm going to do when I do it, but I'm not going to warn you, so just get ready." So I made a couple of phone calls, and this is a true story. And in those days, you could do something like this, and I was very fortunate to be where I was. And the word came down, "When do you want him transferred?" I said, "I don't know, as quick as you can. How about right now?" I said, "Okay, same night." So I stayed around in the office. Kenny was still working. I didn't even warn him. And about 8 o'clock at night, he calls me. He goes, "What the hell?" He goes, "I just got transferred to the gang division." I go, "Okay, good. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Goodbye." And I went home, and I could sleep at night because I had him back with me. And so when I walked in the next day, my staff goes, "Hey, we got a new lieutenant, Rossello from the HIDA. I know he worked for you in the past." I go, "Yeah, we really don't have a spot for him." I go, "Well, I got a spot for him. I just thought about it on the way in. I got 6 people. I'm going to transfer him to a major case team. Kenny's going to be the commander of the major case team. Give him a car, give him that office over there right near mine, and let's get going." So he comes walking in, of course. And kind of funny, when I started in narcotics, he had a coffee cup waiting for me when I walked in. When you're in narcotics in those days, all you had was a desk drawer. You really didn't have your own desk or anything. There were 50 people in some small room at the top of a precinct. Again, we're in the 80s, before they expanded all the narcotics initiatives. And Kenny had a coffee cup for me, and I walked in. So I said, "Hey, you want coffee? I got a cup for you." When he walked in at 9 o'clock the next morning in the gang division, and we were off and running. So I had him back with me. And once in a while, he would always come in with lunch along the way. He retired out of the gang division, and so did I. And he'd always come strolling in with a sandwich, some big giant hero that he found some deli in some neighborhood somewhere that he always knew about. And he'd come in and we'd sit down and have lunch. And it was kind of fun because now we were at this level, and I was, in charge, and he was with me. And it was like the greatest time in my career I could ever ask for. And I was very honored that he retired as a member of that command. Then 9/11 hit. And on the morning of 9/11, I was in early. We had about 30 arrest warrants going the next morning, believe it or not. My Manhattan captain was in. I was in about 6:30 in the morning. We were going over the tactical plan, and of course, Kenny was going to be a big part of that. So he was in early too. And then my administrative lieutenant comes running in, and he goes, "Hey, turn on the TV. We got trouble in Manhattan." So I saw, we took a look at it. Oh, God, the radios were cracking. It was not a lot of, it was chaos, quite honestly. Nobody really knew right away what it was. And we jumped in the car. As I was leaving the office, he stuck his head in. He goes, "I'm coming with you." I said, "Okay." So in my Jeep, we go, 4 of us, and we head toward Manhattan. And the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel was closed both ways. So I looked at Kenny. I was driving. And I looked at the guy at the tunnel, and I said, "Hey, we're going to go through the outbound tunnel." I'm not turning around and going to the Manhattan Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge now. I'm coming through the outbound tunnel. Tell the guy on the other side. And we still had communications at the time because the first building had not come down yet. And we went through, of course, the outbound tunnel. Guy goes, go slow. There's people in there. So we went through. We came out on the West Side Highway. And as we came out, here comes the building down the West Side Highway. Just like you would think a cartoon, that's what it looked like. The rubble was coming down the highway with people running, and it was obviously chaotic. And then there's kind of a funny story that I'll tell you that nobody really knows except for my family and a few close friends. But the Downtown Athletic Club is right there at the foot of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And those of you that watch college football know the Heisman Trophy is given out at the Downtown Athletic Club. I don't know if it still is, but it was at one time. So we looked at this and, again, we didn't really have a lot of communications. We had Nextels. It was chaos. And the radio now, once the building came down, we lost the Motorola tower. We couldn't really talk to anybody. We had a little bit of communication on one of the Nextels on the point-to-point. So we were going to establish a command center in the Downtown Athletic Club. As soon as we got in there, maybe there was 10 of us because there was some other detectives from the Major Case Squad on the West Side Highway. And if you remember, anybody that was there knows the smoke was blowing toward Jersey. And so we got into the Downtown Athletic Club and we tried to establish what we would call a small command center. But the smell of gas started coming out. And we were like, oh my God, the place is filling up with gas. So we get out of the Downtown Athletic Club, we go to the other side of the West Side Highway. And as I'm coming out, making sure everybody's out, me and Kenny are going to the other side. He's getting everybody onto the other side of the road. A yellow fire truck comes out of the rubble. And to this day, I can't find out who this was. But whoever they are, the guy looks at me and he goes, what's the matter? I go, there's gas coming out of the Downtown Athletic Club. He goes, no problem. Down the stairs they go. Maybe up 10 minutes later, and the guy gives me the thumbs up and off he went. Never saw him again. But I credit this guy for saving the Downtown Athletic Club, whoever these two firemen were in this big yellow fire truck. I think it was Jersey City, because Jersey City had yellow trucks at the time. But I never was able to confirm it. And then the post 9/11, of course, everybody was all hands on deck and Kenny was off and running. I was, running around in a different direction. We really didn't spend a ton of time together, except for in the mornings or at night afterwards when we were covered with soot and dirt and things like that. We'd have a cup of coffee and talk a little bit. But he was off with his team and they were out running around and doing what they were supposed to be doing around 9/11. And then, of course, he gets sick. So he retired from the gang division and he went, and I was very comfortable with it because he got to work with another friend of ours, Ralph Blasey. And I knew he was going to go work with Ralph, who was a very good friend of his. They had worked together a long time. And I was very happy for him. I knew it was the right time. Everybody knows when it's the right time to retire. And Kenny knew it was the right time. He wanted to go. He had this opportunity. He took it. And I was very happy for him when it happened. And, the people, when he got sick, that he worked for with Ralph and them, they did such a great job taking care of him. And, I was in touch with him all the time. We had cell phones now, so we didn't have to beep each other or talk on the radio. We actually had cell phones. But one thing about Kenny was he never complained during all that treatment that he went to. I think he worked to the day he passed away. He was actually an employee of Mulligan. I don't think he ever stopped, maybe a week or two before or a very short time. But, man, I've never seen anybody go through that and never complain, at least not to me. I'm sure it was difficult on the family watching it. I got to talk to him quite a bit. But he never said, and just like he always was, he never complained about anything. When we had to work holidays, he'd have a snide comment once in a while, but never really a lengthy complaint at all. And he fought like a dog, and of course, we all know what happened. But I have to tell you, I always use 4 words in my family, and I said this, at his wake: family, honor, loyalty, and respect. Those are 4 words. If you could live by those 4 words, you can make some mistakes along the way, but you're probably going to be okay in life. And I try to teach my kids that every day, to think of those 4 words when they're making decisions. And that was Kenny: family, honor, loyalty, and respect. Well, I miss the phone calls. I miss the beeps. I miss the lunches. I miss the family updates of the kids with water bottles in the car and Kenneth scuffing the tires on his car and Jeanette with the Toyota convertible and all the chaos that we went through over the years. And I know Chris Schneider's here. He's a longtime friend. I'm sure we ran his background in the old days before he became a friend of Jeanette's. I miss all that interaction because that's really what makes friendship when you're in the police department. Those days, those things that happen, those updates of family and all that stuff. And I, of course, should stay a lot closer to the family, but I get updates and I talk to the family. But every day I would hear, about Elaine working at the jewelry store and all the other stuff, his house. And Kenny always had a folder. Whenever he did something, it took 12 years to get it done. Couldn't get out of the station house without him saying goodbye to the cleaner, stopping at the guy that was gassing the cars. He just would say hello to everybody, and everybody loved him. They didn't like me as much as they liked him. But I knew he had my back in the gang division because they didn't have to like me. I had him with me. And so I say this. I say, we'll never forget, my friend. You deserve this, my brother. And this will always be your home. Thank you.
I don't know what to say. I just want to thank everybody for coming today and for everybody that helped Mike Russo and Lieutenant Swanson help me out here. And all my friends and my family and my wonderful neighbors. My neighbors here on Ewell Place. They're my other family. They are for me all the time. I'll never forget them. And I love you all. And Billy, thank you so much. And Chris Schneider for getting the ball rolling.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.